Hi, everybody. Welcome to the IC Topic Chats. Today is March 28th, 2024. We are joined by three independent consultants who recently made that transition from different places. We've got Kim Leonard, Cheralynn Corsack, and Gillian Marshall. They are they've made the leap. They made that big jump. They decided that this was the right thing for them. And so I'm excited to have them today. So why don't we go do a quick round and just say a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get into some of the questions that I forwarded out to everyone. So Kim, why don't you share a little bit about yourself?
Kim Leonard, she, her pronouns. I'm based in the Portland, Oregon area and have been working in evaluation for a long time in really different sort of contexts and took the leap into my own LLC full-time in August of last year. So it's been about 6 months. I'm doing program evaluation, obviously applied research and some organizational learning work.
Thanks, Kim. Cheralynn, you popped in second, so why don't you share a little bit about yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Cheralynn Corsack, and I am based in Atlanta, Georgia. I have been an evaluator for over 8 years, and most of that has been in consulting, also at nonprofits and in academia. And I started my practice in January 2023, so it's been a little over a year. And I love to do work in rural health and community, mental behavioral health, and substance use.
Thank you. And Gillian?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Gillian Marshall. I am based in Seattle, Washington. I have been doing this full time. This month will be 2 years, and the time has gone by really quickly. I was an academic for over 10 years with Case Western Reserve University and the University of Washington. My area of focus has been in gerontology and mental well-being. And then I'll talk to you a little bit more about sort of the shift that I made and sort of what I'm focusing on here.
So let me throw this out to the group. And the first question that I gave everybody to consider was, how did you make the decision to go to independent? And so I definitely want to hear from Kim and Cheralynn on this. And Gillian, we're going to talk a little bit about your story near the end of our recorded conversation. But Kim and Cheralynn, why don't you jump in and tell us a little bit why you decided to on you, those sorts of things.
Sure.
Either one of you guys can go ahead.
I was just waiting for my 6-year-old to clear the room. She like popped in for a second because it's spring break here. So I feel like I've known for a long time, sort of in my gut, that this was my next step. I just spent about 10 years inside philanthropy as a senior research and learning officer at Oregon Community Foundation. And I just wasn't really drawn to sort of the other kinds of options, right? I didn't want to manage people. I didn't want to necessarily advance inside the foundation. I didn't necessarily want to work at another firm. And so, but I wanted change, and I wanted the kind of change I wasn't going to get inside the foundation, even though the foundation is going through some really exciting change. And I just had a deep desire for like the maximum kind of freedom, control, flexibility, creativity that I think can come with doing this. And I will also say we were in a place with our family, and I was in a place with my job at the foundation which was like super privileged in that I had a nice long runway. It was really possible for me to take that leap because my partner works full time. So all of those things sort of led me to make the leap.
So I think this is an important thing to point out. And this was Cheralynn who kind of put this all together. We've got, each of you guys came from 3 different places, which is really neat to be representative. So Kim, you're coming out of foundation work. Cherylynn's coming out of consulting work, and Gillian's coming out of being an academic. So what's nice about this is these are 3 very typical areas that people work in now and are thinking about leaving and starting their independent consulting practice. So it is an illustration that you can come from these places and I'm assuming everybody's healthy, sustainable, successful in their practices. So this shows hopefully that it's doable from all 3 different perspectives. Cheralynn, why don't you talk a little bit about your decision to go independent?
Yeah, of course. So I was working at Public Profit, which is a consulting firm based in Oakland, California. And I was planning to move back to Atlanta, Georgia, which is where I had lived previously. And as a part of that move, I was kind of changing up my whole situation in terms of just ready to move back to Atlanta and wanting to be with folks like in person here and more work with communities around the Southeast. And I just wanted to do my own thing and I felt really good about it. And so I couldn't imagine like applying for jobs and getting hired by somebody else when I wanted to just do whatever I wanted to do. And I had been saving up money actually to like buy a house. And then I thought, what if instead I started a business? So that gave me a really good runway to feel comfortable in where I was at and have the space to kind of like build my business. And so I'm not buying a house anymore, but I will eventually.
So why don't all three of you guys, and I'll start with you, Gillian, why don't you talk about your fear of starting, and once you started, what did you do? Like, what was that first year like? What are some of those experiences? Because certainly we have lots of folks who are, I put on the bubble, maybe that's a March Madness reference, I'm watching too much basketball, but they're sitting there on the bubble going, what's it going to be like? How terrible was it? How am I not gonna eat? Am I gonna have to go to ramen noodles? That sort of a thing. I mean, what did you do during that first year? How did you market? How did you network? So I'll start with Jillian and let her talk about her experiences.
Sure, thanks. So, yeah, the ramen noodle, that's pretty hilarious. I'm a social worker and public health person by training. And so we always make this joke. I don't want to be in line with my clients at the food bank. And that was like my biggest fear. I thought, okay, launching this, I don't have any clients. I sort of don't know what I'm doing, but I'm not totally, I don't have anything solidified. I didn't have a business name. And so the first year was, I wouldn't say it was tough. I would say that it was exploratory. And so it gave me an opportunity to think about how do I want to invent and create. And so I decided to join the Seattle Evaluation Association. And I met Heidi, who is not on the call today, and she told me about this group. And I said, okay, cool. And so I started coming. And as I began to listen to what people are doing and how they're constructing their businesses, how they thought about their businesses, I said, okay, it's giving me some ideas. The other thing, I have to say, it was purely a faith walk because I did not have any clients. I went to something called Monday Night Mastermind that someone was holding here, and we had to introduce ourselves, and that's part of sort of the networking that I would encourage people to do. Introduce myself, said peripherally what I think I'm wanting to do, and the leader of that group said, "Hey, can we talk after the meeting?" And I said, "Sure." And he's like, "I'd like you to evaluate our mastermind group." And that's kind of how it started. And it was amazing because he knew people, he introduced me to people. And everything that I got that first year was purely word of mouth. I didn't advertise, I didn't even have a business card. Um, and so to your question about overwhelming, when I sort of sit down and think about it, it can be overwhelming because I came from, a hard money position at a university where, I did research, I did some teaching, I did some service, I got a regular paycheck, I had insurance, and I'm walking into this space where I didn't have any of that. So when I sat down and thought about it, it was a little overwhelming, but I never missed a mortgage payment. I never missed a meal. I was still able to do vacations, so it can be done.
That's super inspiring. I think that's so cool that you can kind of randomly go, oh, I'm going to go to this Monday event, and next thing you know, you kind of have a first opportunity. That's really cool. Did Cheralynn or Gillian? I'm sorry, Gillian. Kim, did you want to share your kind of experience in that first year? Talk about what it was like for those people who are sitting there paralyzed on the bubble.
Yeah, so what I tell people is it's incredible what you can get done when you don't have a full-time job. When you're just there and you got all the hours to yourself and everyone else is out in the world working, you can go to a lot of things. Like all I wanted to do was learn and like hear from other folks. It was just like constantly like asking people questions, attending every single like group or meeting or one-on-one chat. I read tons of books. I watched so many YouTube videos on like accounting 101, business 101, like anything I could get my hands on, especially when like I started with 2 clients and so I still had tons of time on my hand, like a ridiculous amount of time on my hands. And so, yeah. And I wasn't really ever worried about making ends meet because, I don't know, I've done a lot of jobs in my life. If I need to, I can babysit, I can get a waitressing job, I can bartend, I can walk dogs. It doesn't matter to me. I was never concerned about like paying my rent. And I just mostly like went into this saying, I'm just going to trust the process. I'm going to dive in. I'm going to use my hours that I have, do the best I can, and we're going to see what happens. And if after a year things aren't working out well, then I can start thinking about like other situations. But I really felt like the only way that I was going to do it was if I like fully poured myself into something and said, I'm going to do this and I'm going to make it work in whichever way I need to make it work.
Cheralynn, I think you kind of just laid out the process, but talk about trust the process. What does that mean to you?
Um, I think, I think if you have one foot in and one foot out, you're not going to succeed. Or at least, some people will, but I just think you have less of a chance of like really making it because you're so unsure about yourself. And instead of like trusting in your abilities as an evaluator and trusting in your abilities to like connect with other folks, and just like build relationships with people, like I would literally say, I am good at building relationships with people. Like I am good at talking to people. So just like lean into that. And I think if I had been one foot in, one foot out, I'd probably like having another full-time job, like it wouldn't have gone as well because I'm trying to worry about someone else's business while I'm trying to worry about my own. And instead I got to fully worry about my own business and focus on myself.
Kim, why don't you share a little bit about your experiences?
I love those stories so much, and I'm a little bit jealous of Cheralynn for getting the chance to like 100% focus all your time right out of the gate. Because for me, that transition happened in the middle of summer and childcare sort of chaos in my house, and that was intentional because I wanted to spend some extra time with my kiddo before she went to first grade, but it also meant that I had a little bit of a slow, wonky kind of start, and I knew that that was going to happen. So again, it was super privileged opportunity to spend many months in my old job, like mentally preparing, if nothing else, for the transition, spending a lot of time talking to people, boosting my confidence, and knew to expect it to be weird and wonky and to be really thoughtful about how I used my time. So yes, I did have all this time on my hands, and I also found myself spending it sitting in front of my computer for like the 8 hours when I had the day. And I was like, this is the point of doing this for me, was not to sit in front of my computer for 8 hours. So I had to really like work on some of those habits. But I also spent a lot of time catching up with friends. It was an incredible opportunity in the fall because I had that time to reconnect with old connections, to solidify connections I have, to spend time with work friends, right? Which is an incredible network. And I also I didn't market either. It's really been word of mouth. I carried a small project away with me from the foundation, which really helped me feel like I could make it happen. But I also sort of proactively reached out to some people and things that I knew were happening, right? And said, hey, if there's any way I can support this, let me know, right? And so there are a few things that have happened along the way that were possible because I reached out to those folks who were in my network or the initiatives that I knew about and sort of wanted to make those connections. But I will totally agree that it's like overwhelming at first. It's scary, right? Like I spent a lot of time probably overthinking it while I was at the foundation. And I might have left or made the transition much, much earlier if I had sort of found the bravery to do so. But I was also really happy with the team I was on, really happy with the work that I was doing. And so I had to work through some like pre-grief about that change for myself as well. So anyway, there's a lot of layers there. And I see a comment in the chat about health insurance. And let me tell you, this was like one of my biggest worries because my husband is also self-employed. And I did not, I'd carried our insurance for many, many, many years, right, for our family. And it ended up being not as hard as I thought it would be to figure out. Was it a pain? I'm in the US, absolutely a pain. Is it expensive? Absolutely expensive. But I just had to plan ahead for it and sort of get through that hump. And now it's not a thing that I really think about anymore at all, which is amazing because I thought it would be a huge worry.
I think health insurance is just one of about perhaps 100 different things that are like huge worries for us that are humps. They become like, well, once you have to deal with it, you deal with it. Like a lot of us are thinking little things like general liability insurance. What's that? I don't want to have to figure that out. And then you sit down and you figure it out. And it's one thing that I think we all realize is that with all things, but definitely with independent consulting, every day from now until you stop doing this, you're always going to be confronted with a thing you've never seen before, and you've got to figure out how to do it. I was in the independent position once upon a time. It was just me, and I had to figure this out. Now I'm in the piece of what does it look like to have 15 people work for you, and which sounds amazing, and sometimes it can be, but a lot of times you got to figure out how to manage people and how do you have consistent policies and things like that. And that can be equally stressful. Anyway, so it's not about me. I do want to ask the question, which is, what are some of those mistakes you made? What are the things that you wish you could do over or feel free to share as much as you want or as little as you want here, because I think we don't always want to admit we make mistakes, but I think this is the stuff that people definitely want to hear about because they want to try and avoid that, making those mistakes when they go out. Anybody who wants to jump in, feel free.
I'm happy to say that I'm like already struggling with the overcommitment problem. I'm in the middle of saying yes to too many things, right? And spreading myself potentially too thin. I can see it coming and I'm like working actively to prevent it, but it's that's like a lifelong tendency of mine. And as someone who wanted to do this so that I wasn't actually working like 40 plus hours a week, that's something I have to pay like extra attention to. And I definitely have ended up with some pieces of work that are like not at the center of what I want to be doing because I felt like I needed to fill my plate, right? And so I can see how they're like pre-mistakes or mistake adjacent, right? Because I might have to say no to something that comes up a few months from now that like is closer to the heart of what I want to do because I have these other things on my plate that I still care about and I'm committed to, but hopefully that's at least partially an answer. And Cheralynn, I saw you come off mute too, so hopefully you have something juicy.
Absolutely. Here's the thing, like it's almost like unbelievable when we talk to people who are like first starting this process of exploration, and we talk to them about the survey responses we've seen from different surveys. And one of them is, what are your worries, right? That's the question we put out to people, particularly on the 2015 survey. And the answer was not enough work, how to go about networking and creating business development, but almost equally as prevalent was too much work. And so I think that's really important that you pointed that out, Kim, because what happens is we say yes to too much and then we're overwhelmed. And then they're thinking, how am I going to get all this work done? Anyway, all right. Go ahead, Cheralynn. I think you were getting ready to say something.
One of the things I was thinking about this question was I wish I had actually like walked through all of my numbers and all of my QuickBooks. Like I use QuickBooks and I took accounting 101 by YouTube and business 101 by YouTube. And like, there were things that I was doing and I had an accountant and like, so I felt like I was doing my best. And at the same time, like, my numbers were different. So like when I would keep track of things in an Excel sheet being like, these are when these people are going to pay me here, here, and here, and these are like what my estimated expenses are, like then you go into QuickBooks and then you're like, I just don't even understand why that number is different. So it was like, because you feel like you have everything, but I really just needed someone to like sit there and like be like, this is that. And me being like, well, why doesn't that equal that? And they're like, that's normal. It doesn't equal that because of this other thing. And I just feel like that was something where like those are the things that stress me out when I don't know my numbers, when I don't know like what is going on in my business. And when I feel like it's like I'm behind, I'm like, oh my God, I haven't looked at them in like 2 or 3 weeks. And then that stresses me out. And the minute I like walk through it, I'm like, okay, I know where I'm at and I can move forward.
Some of the suggestions I've heard from others is to start off with like, and I know Kurt Stukes here. He's said this too. Start off with just like setting up a contract with a small business accountant and meet with them on a weekly, monthly, regular basis, to have them look through what you're doing and have them do that. I mean, is that something that you started doing, Cheralynn?
Yes, I had an accountant prior to even like is setting up my business. Like she set up my LLC for me. And but I think I didn't know what I didn't understand is the thing. It was that she was dealing with stuff and I was like, okay, great, she's dealing with it. And then, like tax season comes around and me wanting to actually have the time and the want to like learn more about the numbers, and then finding out I'm going into QuickBooks and I'm like, why do these not match? Like I don't understand, like everything's accounted for. And they weren't like huge issue. It wasn't huge issues. Like nothing was like a problem because I had an accountant that was overseeing, but it was a problem for me that I didn't understand exactly what was happening because I don't like that. I want to know exactly what's happening. So I think there was just like a communication issue almost. And I've now switched accountants. So it's getting sorted out, but it makes me uncomfortable to not know every single tiny piece of my books.
We haven't heard from Gillian for a while. So Gillian, what are some things that you could go back and what mistakes did you make, or what do you wish you knew before you started?
So I'm going to say mistakes are inevitable. You're going to make them. And so just, be comfortable with that because you don't know what you don't know, and really, lean into resources. So for example, coming here was such a huge resource for me. One of the mistakes I made was pricing structure. How much should I charge and how should I make that happen? And I know Becky, Garrow, and Matt did this whole thing on pricing, which was super helpful. But I shared with Anne in office hours that I built this wonderful proposal for somebody. I put in the quantitative stuff and I forgot to bill for the qualitative. So going back to them humbly and saying, you know what, I forgot to put this piece in. It's an additional 20,000. Can you swing that? Luckily, they were able to, but that was like a huge mistake. And so now I'm just like, making sure I have templates that I can sort of plug and chug. Project estimation, I had to figure out how long is it going to take to do something. And I would sort of underbid because I thought it would take shorter time than it did. And so thinking about that and asking people questions and then really kind of jotting down after each project, how much time did that really take me? The other thing is getting a contract. I know I had a conversation with Becky about this, but I decided to get a lawyer to, have the legalese. It was worth the money. In addition to the contract, he also helped me trademark my business name. I heard a horrible story about someone that bought a business, but they didn't trademark the name, and someone else bought the trademark, and then they had to pay the other person. It was a hot mess. So spend the money, get a nice contract, get your stuff trademarked. I agree with Cheralynn about the accountant. My shit was a hot mess. I did not know, how to kind of pull it all together. I ended up paying a whole bunch of taxes because I really didn't know. And so was going to put this in the advice section. I have a tip for you in the advice section about how to mitigate that. And then client expectations. I had someone assume that they were going to get the data after, and we didn't talk about that. And so make sure that your client expectations are clear. So now I have written somewhere that, you know, data will not be handed over unless you explicitly ask, and there'll be an additional charge to de-identify the data. So those are some things that I didn't think about, had to experience, and now have a process for.
Well, Gillian, stick around. I'm going to ask you the question about what are some of those smart decisions? What are things you're glad you started by doing?
Coming to this meeting, I mean, through this meeting, Becky always has great tips. Jessica Metcalf told me about office hours, and that's how I got connected with Anne, because I was meeting a new client and I was like, how do I start this conversation? How do I figure out what they need? Like, I don't want to go in cold. Like, how do I start that conversation? And then Anne was so gracious, and she had a video, and then I was able to kind of ask her some additional questions. So having a tribe, what I call my people who I can sort of go to and ask questions, because you're new, and again, you don't know, and things sort of pop up, and there's a lot of information, wealth, human resource here. So use that. I ended up getting a business coach, and although he was trying to convince me to do a lot of Instagram nonsense, I'm not interested in that. I said, you know, I'm a social worker by training, I'm relational. So how do we sort of, you know, make that work? So business coach was helpful in helping me sort of organize stuff. Getting a personal assistant to do those templates for me. I have a, you know, what do you want to know about us template? I have a proposal template. I have a budget template. The lawyer, and then giving my business exposure. So going to networking events, doing trainings. There's all these different trainings since COVID for small businesses, to kind of figure out how to do a business plan, a capability statement, all those kinds of things. The CRM, I got Constant Contact, and I designed a new newsletter. So sending that out to people. I was invited to do this post-award grant training. Just tell people to think about how to, what's the word I'm looking for? Small evaluation, you know, kind of thing, how to think about that. And through that, she didn't pay me much. And so I took a chance, because I'm now speaking to 80 people. And through that, I have someone that wants me to evaluate all of his programs. Be talking to him later today. So that was sort of helpful. And asking people to introduce me to other people was also something that was helpful. I think that was it.
Well, that's really good. Before we go to Kim or Cheralynn, Anne, why don't you do a quick plug on what is office hours?
Sorry, I was just trying to put it in the chat. So yeah, Matt and I had a similar brilliant idea at the same time, and we didn't coordinate. So IC chat happens here. Think of office hours as the Las Vegas of IC chat, right? So we're a smaller group. I have a YouTube channel. I don't record a lot because people bring their like questions that you don't want to say in front of 45 people. Like, I forgot to budget for qualitative data, and now what, right? So it's just a really safe, hopefully yummy place where you can ask all the embarrassing questions. I don't claim to have all of the answers. After 20 years, I'm still learning, but we learn together. I was just putting the disclaimer because God love you, Gillian. I'm so sorry. So I don't post the office hours on the IC listserv at all. You need to follow me on LinkedIn, and I do the update there, but it's usually the second and fourth Tuesdays of the month at noon, most of the time. But I do have a lot of travel in the spring, so it's kind of wonky. So follow me on LinkedIn. I always post there. When in doubt, just shoot me an email. I'll put the link in the chat. So that's it. Yep. Everybody's welcome.
Thanks, Ann. Yeah, we heard from Gillian, she was talking about all the wonderful things that happened through the pandemic. I mean, IC topic chats, they kind of just organically happened because I was doing the intro to evaluation webinar e-group, e-thing, whatever it was called, through AEA, and we couldn't talk to each other. And I said, let's just keep meeting on Thursdays at 11 o'clock. And people kept showing up, and then we created a following, and people keep showing up for some reason. And so here we are almost 4 years later. It's crazy. Kim and Cheralynn, why don't you talk to us about some of your smart decisions?
I echo what Gillian said. Just learning and talking to people. I'm so appreciative for like all the different groups that are available through here, and attended a lot of them. And I felt like those Ann's office hours, masterminds, just full echo on what Gillian was saying. I think the other smart decision was I really appreciated subcontracting. I was aiming to have a balance between subcontracts and my own contracts. And there definitely were some, like struggles with like subcontracting situations and finding relationships that work really good. But I now feel like I have select people that I work with and I'm pretty set on them. Like, I'm like, we're good to go. We work really well together. And I think that gives me the opportunity to, yes, have my own projects and hold, but also like continuously work with other teams and learn from others at the same time. And it's just a lot of fun, and it just keeps me learning and growing.
Oh, I'll totally echo that and appreciate all the things that Gillian shared too. One of the smartest things I think that I've done is not think of it as a solo only alone practice. I work best collaboratively. I like to work with other people, and every single project that I have both like the clients as partners, but also partners working on it with me, and in various arrangements. And that's been really important for me to not feel too isolated and to continue to learn and grow and to work with people that I really enjoy working with. So that's been huge. Making time to continue nurturing relationships, right? Like my calendar can fill up with those coffees and check-ins and things, but that's where the work has come from. So that's really important and valuable. I will say too that I haven't done a lot of I have a list now of things I should look into just from hearing from everybody as well. Like I was able to get started. I'm 6 months in and feeling like I have plenty of income and great projects, and I don't yet have a lawyer. I don't yet have fancy accounting software because I haven't needed it. I've been able to get started in a simple enough way. But I'm on the cusp of needing some of those things, and that's now a to-do list, right? But I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't think you have to have every single one of those things like lined up to get going. I think you can get going and keep it simple and sort of work on those things over time. And giving myself permission to do that, I think was really important and helpful for me. And then I'll put a plug in for Boost and Bloom. I took Stephanie Evergreen's Boost and Bloom course while I was actually still in my old job, with permission, of course. And it was incredibly confidence building, incredibly helpful in giving me like a set of resources and tools, as well as an additional community of people who are trying to figure stuff out, right? And I didn't have any business management training or anything remotely related to accounting or any of that either. And so getting just enough of that to sort of get me started and know what I should be on the lookout for and anticipate, like that's been enormously helpful. So I'll plug that as well.
All right, let's do a quick round of trusted colleague. The question was to you all, if you had a trusted colleague this individual who's getting started right now in independent consulting, what piece of advice would you share with them? So Kim, you're already on, so why don't you go ahead and answer that question? What piece of advice would you share with a trusted colleague?
Yeah, I think this is something I'm still working on, ironically, but really getting clear about what it is that you want to do and why, right? To get to be able to explain that, to practice talking about it, so that your message is clear and you know when a project comes your way if it's really something that you want in on or not, right? And I think that that can evolve, right? I've been trying to hold that sort of loosely. But that was something that Boost and Bloom gave me. We did values exploration, and I spent a lot of time thinking about like, what is it that I want to actually say on my website, right? And what does that mean? And I think that that is super, super helpful in sort of creating that pathway into the work too.
Cheralynn, what's something you'd share with a trusted colleague?
I would tell them to gravitate towards people, projects, clients that energize you. Like those people who you leave feeling motivated and excited to do something, go to them and like spend a lot of time with them, because it's hard, you know, it takes a long time. You have to motivate yourself constantly. Like you now don't really have an external party that's forcing you to do things. And I say forcing in a nice way, but like, you know, when you have a job, you're responsible and you're accountable to folks. And when you're on your own and maybe you don't have a ton of clients yet, like you have to constantly motivate yourself, even through not getting an RFP, having an interview, not getting the client, like all of these things. So like, if somebody's making you feel good and you're having good conversations, like keep going to that place that's going to keep bringing your energy up and making you feel like you can keep going.
This whole conversation is so inspirational for me. I think it's great. Gillian, what are some things you'd share with a trusted colleague about getting started?
Establish your community, your tribe. Join any sort of associations. Find spaces like this. And the one thing I do want to say about this space is that you all have done a wonderful job at making people feel comfortable here and not feel competitive and feel comfortable asking questions. So I really, really want to say that. And take advantage of as many opportunities as you can. There's Apex, which was formerly PTAC. There's one in every state. It's a free service to you. They help you with your capability statement. They help you kind of get your UEI numbers, all these different things that I was like, I don't understand that, but they walk you through that. And I think Cheralynn said this earlier, have conversations with people. I did virtual coffee meetings, and I would send people a virtual Starbucks gift card, and they were so excited and appreciative because they didn't even think that was a thing. But I was just so grateful for the time that they shared. I would say start off slow and go at your own pace. I did not, have a lot of people. It was just me. It was just real slow and steady. But one of the things that gave me a lot of freedom was when Becky talked about having subcontractors, because when things started rolling in, I didn't want to turn down work. Getting subcontractors was super helpful. I would also say be selective. Not all money offered is good money, and it might be a headache. And so really kind of tease that out and figure out, is this really going to be worth it and worth my time? And then bringing on people and making sure that, they have a similar work ethic that you do. Through this entity, I met Cheralynn. I was looking for someone to help with data viz, and she loves to do data viz. So we've worked on a couple projects together, and I've enjoyed really working with her. And then the last thing I'd say is your business is going to evolve, and just be okay with that. I mean, there are things that I wrote, I'd say the first couple of months, that I look back now, kind of like when you write an article and you're like, I can't believe I wrote that. That's ridiculous. Leaning into that and saying it's okay, because you're learning and growing and evolving, and things will shift and change. And one of the things that I'll say really quickly that changed for me is that now I sort of have two buckets where I'm doing sort of the research evaluation piece, and I'm also doing some assessment clinical pieces too. And so that those are the sort of growth pieces that have allowed me to evolve and think about how I want to market my business. So.
Well, thank you, everybody. We're going to stop recording here, but for right now, I'm going to say goodbye to everybody in the YouTube world, and everybody else who's live, stick around, because we're going to get into the open conversation period of this whole thing.